Okay. Well, welcome everybody for the webinar. If you are looking to learn about trust land transfer and the opportunities to protect more state lands, you are in the right place. Thanks for coming out tonight. I know that it's such a wonderful day that you could be out getting wet, but instead you're here with us. So that makes perfect sense. We are going to run through some slides. The goal of this webinar is to let you know about the Trust Land Transfer Program, how it can protect state lands, DNR lands with ecological significance, but is also a program that is a win-win for trust beneficiaries and the DNR, as well as those of us that care about yeah, protecting state lands for conservation. We're going to run through some slides. There'll be a Q&A at the end. So definitely hold your questions for the end, and we'll make sure that there's time for that. And great to see so many folks here that have signed on to previous letters supporting this program. So with that, I am going to turn it over to John Sherwin, who is engaged in the Stewards of Washington State Lands, which is a new nonprofit really focused squarely on supporting trust land transfer opportunities here in Washington State.
All right, thanks, Tom. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I am the president of this newly formed nonprofit, Stewards of Washington State Lands. So, we'll go today through who are the stewards. We'll review the Trust Land Transfer Program and give a history as well of the TLT program. And then we'll talk about opportunities for the upcoming 2026 legislature session. And then there'll be a Q&A. So like Tom said, keep the questions going in the chat. You can also ask questions to us at the end. Come off mic and do that. And then we'll also talk about how you can get involved. So that I'll just go into Stewards of Washington State Lands. So we're a new nonprofit. We're actually, we started in October. But it was born out of the leadership of the TLT Advocacy Coalition, which has actually been working together for about 5 years and was really hugely responsible for reinvigorating the TLT program. And we'll learn more about the program in a little bit. But that was the group that really focused on this and then recognized the need for further advocacy around more broadly, conservation and stewardship and even recreation within Washington State. So our mission is to advocate for the conservation of ecologically and socially valuable state land. And again, the why, there is this need and it's ongoing. So we recognize that we really need to keep focused on this and, make sure that we meet those needs. And then our structure promotes stability and allows room for growth too. So while we're currently focused very much on the TLT program and DNR specifically, we really want to make sure we keep that, broaden that focus over time and grow mindfully and make sure that we're thinking about all public lands in Washington State. So, coordination with statewide partners is time consuming, but it's critical. And I think the TLT, the result of the TLT work and the advocacy work over that, 3 or 4 or 5 years really shows that when you do the work, you get this outcome. So it's all about partnerships. And so really appreciate your interest today, you're being here. We're really happy you're engaging and look forward to collaborating with you and your organizations. So going a little bit deeper into what we envision the stewards doing is, again, we will continue leading this TLT coalition to promote and advocate for the TLT. We're not going to lose focus on this. We have a vision of restoring it to its heyday, to its full glory, fully funded, program. That's very important. So we're not going to lose focus on that at all. But we will continue to educate the public and lawmakers and foster a community-driven conservation approach. And that's why these webinars are great. We make these connections, we bring people together. We'll talk about the upcoming lobby day that we're going to host in partnership with Sierra Club and Washington Wild at the end of January. And those in-person events are very important and to foster that community-driven conservation. We really also want to support DNR and partners for responsible land transition. So we envision that these programs will evolve and there needs to be focus and continued striving for excellency around these. We want to also strengthen the TLT program and specifically DNR's natural area programs. So make sure they're funded, make sure they're resourced appropriately. And then, like I talked about before, too, spur this really landscape scale conservation, really have this big picture vision and think about all across Washington State. So it's really important to work with people, communities all across the state, and make sure that we can help folks where they need it. And finally, and definitely not last but not least, is supporting tribal sovereignty, and making sure that we engage and are good allies and partners for the tribes, so that everybody, it's a win for everybody. And that's very important. So next, I'm going to turn it over to Jim Freeberg, our executive director, and he'll walk through the TLT program.
Great, thanks, John. So folks are here because of an interest in trust land transfer program, but I thought I'd start even with a review just to make sure folks are really clear on kind of what this is, because it is just a conservation tool, one of many out there, but one that the legislature has an opportunity to put some additional funding into this year, and that's why we're here, because we want to make sure folks are aware of this and join us in our effort this next session to convince legislators that this is something that they should get behind. So trust land transfer is really unique in terms of conservation tools at DNR because it does two really critical things. One, it puts ecologically valuable trust lands into conservation. We'll talk about trust lands and what those are shortly. But it takes public lands out of revenue generating status and puts it into protected status, which can happen in a number of different fashions. But it needs to go to a public agency or even a tribe. So it can't go to a land trust, but it makes sure that land formerly in DNR's kind of trust status is protected for perpetuity. And it does so by getting funding from the legislature that is then used to buy replacement land funding, or excuse me, replacement land to generate revenue for trust beneficiaries. Again, we'll talk about a little bit more what that really means and kind of why that's critical and an important part of it. A few things to know about this tool, though. It was started in the late 1980s. Since then, it's protected over 125,000 acres all over the state. Every single corner of the state has benefited. Some of those popular ones, if you're in the Puget Sound area, Mount Si and the Middle Fork Snoqualmie are creatures of the Trust Land Transfer Program. Up in the San Juans, we had a big project on Blakely Island on the very east side. That's one of the first views of ferry goers as you're headed up to the San Juans. And we're able to get that funded and protected so that when people, from all over the world, they're coming to the San Juans, they see trees and they don't see clear cuts. So pretty cool, critical project up there. The legislature just funded more projects that are in the midst of being transferred to tribal partners, which is really exciting for conservation. So Beckler 6 is one up. Near Skykomish, right along the Beckler River Road, that the Alpine Lakes Protection Society was really critical in encouraging the Tulalip tribe to be willing to be the recipient of that. And then the Quileute tribe is going to be receiving, let me see how many acres here, around 370 acres near Lake Ozette in the Olympic National Park that they will be able to use um, for accessing cedar, which actually is a pretty important resource for them as a tribe. But they didn't have any cedar trees available on their reservation that they could use, and so this gives them a source of their own trees to use for their cultural um, value there. So very exciting project there. The legislature also has an opportunity this year to fund a project over in Ancient Lakes that a few of us had an opportunity to visit this fall. If people have been out there just north of George, the Gorge at George, it's surrounded by fish and wildlife land, and there's quite a bit of outdoor recreation and incredible wildlife habitat. And if funded by the legislature, it would be transferred to the Fish and Wildlife for conservation. So, Sean, let's keep going on the slides. I mentioned a little bit about trust lands, and it's important to know that DNR is the agency that manages the vast bulk of public land in our states. This is the state agency, right? And their land, 5.6 million acres, primarily state trust lands, which they need to generate revenue for trust beneficiaries. Um, aquatic lands, so tidal lands. They also have community forest, Teanaway Community Forest, and others. And then what's most important, I think, for conservationists is their natural areas. Think of these as kind of the state version of a wilderness area. So Chris is putting a link here in the chat. And a lot of these were created, I would say probably the bulk of these were created by the Trust Land Transfer Program, whereas DNR, the legislature, and the state said, hey, some of these places are too valuable to be logged. Um, let's put these into protected status instead. And on average, DNR generates around $270 million for the state from logging sales, mineral sales, commercial leases, and many other types of um, revenue generating activities. And there's going to be an opportunity actually this next session for the legislature to formally authorize yet another one called ecosystem services that we won't get in here today, but know that that is kind of part of the political conversation. So, um, trust land transfer, how exactly does this work? And folks are, I think, often unsure of what this really means, and how does it work? And it's challenging. But if you go back to how the state was the recipient of trust lands, it happened primarily in two ways. At statehood, Washington State received a whole bunch of land, obviously appropriated from Native Americans and tribes, but it was given to the state at statehood to with the idea that this new young state could generate non-tax revenue for government services like constructing schools, from different services like logging and selling mineral rights. And then also during the Great Depression, this counties received a lot of land from landowners that weren't able to pay their taxes when they were recently cut over. The trees were sold, and then that kind of bare stump land was often foreclosed, and so counties were the recipient of thousands and thousands of acres. Collectively, this land was turned over to the state to manage for the benefit of counties, though. And so counties are those trust beneficiaries as well as their junior taxing districts. So think hospital districts, school districts, fire districts, any of those kind of small taxing districts that are potential recipients. We call those beneficiaries. So with trust and transfer, the legislature buys out the trust because DNR holds all these lands in a trust with the legal mandate to generate revenue for trust beneficiaries. With the trust and transfer program, the legislature buys it out, which is legally required to take these lands out of the trust status, and then transfers it to a new owner, a public agency or a tribe that is going to manage it for conservation. And that's part of the kind of the legal process that the legislature requires when they put funding into the program. So that's how it's worked. That's why it's called trust land transfer. It's a wonky name, but that's the general process. Um, uh, I think this slide is important to talk about the history of the Trust Land Transfer Program because the roots of the group that John described, the stewards of Washington State lands, really kind of came in here at the 2021, I guess, period, 2020, 2021,
Yes, sir.
um, where legislative funding had been drying up for the program after it had received quite a bit of funding in the 90s and 2000s, to the tune of, I think, over $800 million collectively. But advocates for the program, I think, had kind of began to focus on other priorities, and the attention drifted a little bit. And with that, funding started to dry up. So a number of conservation groups got together and said, "Hey, this is important. We need to convince the legislature to revitalize this program." And then in 2023, we saw the passage of HB 1460, which put the Trust and Transfer Program into law, and a robust funding package, $17 million to protect 4,800 acres. And that was the first time in a number of years that the legislature had made investments in trust land transfer, and they've kept it up since then. About $11 million in 2024, which is a supplemental budget, which is actually what we're going into here in the 2026 session. And then last year, actually this last session, excuse me, there was another $16.7 million in funding for four projects And actually, this last year was marked the first time that there were projects submitted under this new kind of formal process that was kickstarted by the passage of the bill in 2023. So, okay, let's keep going. So, this next year, the legislature has an opportunity to put more funding into the trust land transfer program. We are making an ask, which is a pretty big ask, $31 million. It is a number of projects. When the trust land transfer legislation was passed in 2023, it created an advisory committee to help rank and prioritize the projects. That was one of the concerns that legislators had is if we have this kind of new process, how are we going to know where to put funding first? And so, an advisory committee, folks here, including John and Robin, are on that advisory committee to help make it easier for the legislature to understand what are the most important projects. So, what we're looking at is the remainder of the list of that's been unfunded that DNR submitted to the legislature um, this past year. These projects, in total, we're making an ask of $31 million. We know that's a lot of money, but this is in the capital budget, not the operating budget, which we know is under significant strain right now. The capital budget has additional room that's bonded funding that the legislature can tap for construction of state buildings and also land acquisition projects like the Trust Land Transfer Program. So I won't go into detail of these projects. I'm happy to answer questions though as as they come up. So. I do see one quick question here that I'll answer in the chat. What guarantee is there that land transferred to a tribe remains in conservation status and does not become a source of timber? It's a good question, Ed. You know, the legislature requires that the land be placed in conservation status. There are kind of some questions into what exactly does that mean because there are some tribes that might want to do some thinning for ecological reasons that the legislature um, I think considers a valid conservation use. But once that land is transferred, there are some conservation requirements that are part of that deed transfer that say it has to be um, for conservation or similar use. Okay, so want to talk briefly about some of the widespread support that Trustland Transfer has had, and Washington Wild has been an incredible help for us in really kind of documenting and formalizing the support for the Trustland Transfer program throughout the state. So there have been dozens of elected officials, recreation and outdoor conservation groups that have signed on to letters of support over the past few years. And we hope if your organization is not signed on to these, we'll speak at the end about how you can join in and have an opportunity to sign these letters in the future. But know that there's incredible widespread support from a wide variety of elected officials, Democrat and Republican, Puget Sound, Eastern Washington, Olympic Peninsula, and really all over the state. So, next slide. Okay, so a few things. We're way ahead of schedule here. That's good, but we're going to have lots of time for questions. A couple ways that you can help us this next session. One, we'd love for you to join our lobby day. We'll be having that on January 28th. There'll be a link in the chat for you to sign up. We want to spread the word around the Trust Land Transfer Program and encourage others to understand this new program. I say new in that the sense it's been revitalized by that passage of the legislation in 2023, and I think it's still there's still opportunity to get the word out there about how valuable this program is. And as part of that, we do encourage people to help identify new properties for the trust land transfer program. Uh, there was an application cycle that just closed in September that we heard has around 40 applicants. Um, or excuse me, 40 applications from around the state, which is really exciting. The legislature will have the opportunity to consider those projects after they're vetted by DNR, starting in the 2027 legislative session. But it's really exciting to see that there's that much interest. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, you can add your organization's name to the support letters, and I'll hand over to Tom to talk about a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So yeah, support letters. I think a number of you have signed on to letters that I've coordinated around the trust line transfer program over the last really decade, but certainly in the last 3 or 4 years, we just submitted a letter to the governor, which basically encouraged him to consider making this ask to the legislature, which is that's the process that he's going through right now, and I think we expect to see what he does put forward to the legislature before Christmas. So yeah, if you get emails from me, you're good. If you don't get emails from me asking you to sign on to letters, feel free to reach out or put your name in the chat. My email is pretty simple. It's Tom at wawild.org, and I'll make sure your organization has the opportunity to sign on. I think this time we'll be really trying to focus on making sure we have good representation in district from some key state legislators that are really budget leaders that are making the decision on the capital budget. And yeah, we'll probably kick that letter out on the very first part of January and run it through the lobby day on the 28th. So we'll have that as a tool when we go and meet with legislators.
Right. Well, now we're opening up for Q&A. So feel free to continue adding questions in chat or, come off, mute and ask your question, and we'll do our best to answer those. And I think Rick had a good explanation of deed covenants in the chat. That was really great to see. Okay, yeah, and Connor asked, could you all speak to the 2026 supplemental funding request from the stewards? Jim, do you think you could take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Connor. Good question. So DNR has made a formal request to the legislature to fund the remainder of projects that were not funded uh, in its 2025 budget request. So state agencies make a formal request prior to the legislative sessions, kind of filtered up through the governor and the governor's proposal to the legislature. And by statute, DNR is limited to just a $30 million request every year. So they requested $30 million of projects for the 2025 session. The legislature funded about $16.8 million of that package, which included actually one portion of the Track C North project from the Yakima Nation. If we could even go back up a little bit, I can show this on the slides because it's a little confusing here, but um, the Tract C North, which is actually the second project, you see an asterisk here. That project was partially funded by the legislature with $3.3 million. Now there's still 3.5 million to be funded for that project. So DNR is requesting the remainder of the projects, which is actually these Track C projects. Um, I think, and that's and then the Middle Fork Snoqualmie project. So and Babcock Bench. So they're requesting those first five projects. We think they should go even further. The legislature should go even further and fund those bottom four projects, three in Jefferson County, and then the Trout Lake area, Trout Lake, just east of Mount Adams. So thanks, Connor. Does that help?
Any other questions? Anybody have anything or need clarity on anything or any other? Any other questions? Welcome. Okay, Daniel, do you want to ask your question? Yeah, thanks.
Howdy, thanks so much for all the work that you're putting into the TLT. It's really cool to see. It's such a powerful conservation mechanism. And I'm glad you're, working hard to put more juice into it, to have more of these lands go through it. So I'm over here in Whatcom County, and I've been involved in older forest conservation, watershed health, these type of things. And what really brought me into it was a forest in our community called Upper Rutsatz Forest. And I've been studying the TLT, and you all are super familiar with it. So I'm kind of have some questions more towards the 2027 through 2029 biennium, I'd imagine. And because we were involved a lot with the NCS provisos over the past years, and then last year's like Castro counties, and we were pursuing that with Upper Rutsats. But with the NCS, there's no RWCA for tribal management transfer, where with the TLT it does. And we got far enough with NCS where the Nooksack tribe essentially like heard about all the conservation work around Upper Rutsats, and they voiced that they're really interested in tribal management, which the TLT is set up for. But my main question is from what I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the TLT is often used for underperforming lands. So in the context of like the best high conservation value land, like the best of the best, um, like what is your kind of thought process of having that be the TLT be a mechanism for conserving super high conservation, like critical watershed older forests?
Yeah, great question. I can speak to that a little bit. When the authorizing legislation was passed, it was the legislature made it pretty clear that these lands for the trust and transfer program have to be economically underperforming. And I'll try and find the language from the statute there. And DNR has a little bit of latitude by which they define that, but they do also have to conduct this best interest of the trust analysis, which makes it clear that if there's active revenue generating activity such as timber sales currently scheduled for a plot of land, they're generally not going to make that kind of move it through the process. That's been something DNR has been um, pretty straightforward, I would say upfront about. But there is a kind of a broad definition of economically underperforming, and there might be some opportunities in the future to, get DNR and the legislature to think differently about that.
Yeah, I'll just add that like economically underperforming lands, obviously it could be a tract of land that doesn't have any trees, and that obviously would make sense to fall in that category. But it could also be lands that might have trees, even old trees that are on steep slopes, making it, uneconomic to actually harvest that. Or has murrelets, or it might be part of an HCP with the federal government through the Endangered Species Act. So it could be any number of things of why there's a barrier, even if the actual timber, the trees itself might be old and high value. There might be another reason why they're economically unproductive. And I think with TLT, as we're sitting here in 2025, you can imagine that federal protections like the Endangered Species Act or
Mm.
those types of things, um, we've seen a lot in the last 9 months that will make you blush and reconsider how permanent some of those federal protections are. And so it could be that even for something that's part of an HCP or has murrelet protections federally, having a TLT as an option might just be another layer of comfort for making sure that ecological values are protected.
Hi, this
The
is
different the difference between Washington State and Washington D.C. currently.
this is Rick McGuire with Alpine Lakes Protection Society. Danielle, our group was the applicant for a big TLT that's going to the Tulalip tribe. I'd be happy to talk with you about your place up there sometime. So if you can get my email through Jim or Tom or anyone, let's chat sometime.
Thanks, Rick. That'd be super helpful. We've done so much work, so I think we have like a lot of traction to work with. So it'd be awesome to connect with you. Thanks. I'll reach out to Jim. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? These are great questions, great connections being made.
And I put in the chat there, Daniel, we've probably seen this, the RCW specifically, but for others that are interested in understanding which lands might be suitable for trust land transfer, because there is kind of a specific legal obligation that they have to work with here.
Um, Jim, maybe I think that one of the things that's coming up, first here is the lobby day. I'm sure a number of folks are familiar with lobby days, looking at some of the folks on this list, but maybe it'd be good to kind of just, spell out like what does that look like? What are the types of, experience or knowledge of folks that have attended those in the past, and what kind of support we'll provide for folks, because I do think that, if you haven't gone down to Olympia and in a lobby day, it can be intimidating, but I think we've done a lot of things um, to kind of really make that an easy and comfortable experience.
For sure. Yeah. And I can actually ask that answer too in relation to Michael's question here about why we're asking for so much money. Um, the lobby day is something that this will be, I think, at least the third time we've put it on. And do want to give some credit to the Sierra Club who has helped to pay for a place for us to meet. So we'll be meeting in person with legislators, which, as folks understand, I hope that like the best way to ask anybody for anything is in person, right? You can send them an email, you can make a phone call, but I found in person, there's nothing like it. So we will go down, we'll have to do a little training right off the bat to make sure folks are aware of really what's our ask. You'll get a sense of what's the environment that legislators are experiencing right now, and we'll tell you how to lobby your legislators. If there are a number of new participants, we've also talked about doing a little kind of pre-game webinar the week before that can give you some tools and kind of helpful hints to talk to legislators as part of our lobby day. We know others will be going down for other organizations or perhaps want to talk to their legislators in their home district during breaks, and we can give you some tools to do that as well. But it's an all-day activity. Meet probably around 9 a.m. at the Abigail Stewart House, which is run by the Women's Club of Olympia. We'll meet for maybe an hour or so, and right away, people will have meetings scheduled with your legislators. You only get about 15 minutes with your legislators, as that's just what they give you. So you got to be short and prepared and succinct, but we'll give you the tools to do that. And we will ask that everybody going down there set up meetings with their legislators before you get there. Really important. Some lobby days, this is done for you. In ours, we're a little more bare bones. So we're asking people to set up those appointments um, right away. It's actually not too early to start asking for those appointments because those schedules are out. So legislators and their offices can start to slot you in. Um, and we will have you join in with others from your district so you're not having duplicate meetings. And it's really a fun event. The meetings, like I said, if you get one with both your reps and a senator, maybe that's all at the same time. Maybe it's 15 minutes. 15 minutes spread throughout the day. We'll probably also request some time with the Commissioner of Public Lands, Dave Upthegrove, to address us. So you'll get a chance to hear from him kind of how he feels about this program and then get to meet many of those you're seeing on the call here that have been part of the effort. And I think that companionship and informal gathering is invaluable as well. Um, to Michael's question about why we're asking for 30 million, folks may be aware that Representative Theringer, the capital budget leader over from the Olympic Peninsula, has indicated that this may be his last session, and we think that he is inclined to kind of go big and support projects in his district. So we're going to put him out there and say, hey, these are projects that are important to you. He's indicated his support for the program before. There's incredibly high demand for TLT as indicated by those 40 applications for the next application cycle. And so we want the legislature to really understand the needs and the demand for this program. And so we're giving them a chance to um, kind of put their money where their mouth is, and when they say they support it, let's see a large funding ask. So hopefully, Michael, that helps. I don't expect we're going to see a big number in the governor's budget for the trust land transfer program. That's the starting place for negotiations. But the legislature gets the final word, and we figure the worst we could do is ask.
Yeah, and I'll just add real quick. I think that one of the things to underscore about this program, it's in the capital budget because it's land acquisition, but it really is an opportunity for DNR as an agency to upgrade its assets, not only for the agency, but for their constitutional obligation to benefit trust beneficiaries. So this is really a win-win program, right? And so there is a huge backlog. I think there were 30 some odd projects when we did the first process in the last biennium. They funded what was it, four of those, I believe, and there's five more to get through what they had in the supplemental. But that still leaves 20 some odd projects that all met the best interests of the trust to upgrade assets for a win-win for trust beneficiaries and conservation. And there are 40 something more that have been submitted. Now, there might be a few of those that are the same for sure, but the demand is real. And so what we're trying to do is push to understand that, this program is upgrading assets, it's supporting trust beneficiaries, and it's protecting land in a conservation way that has ecological assets. So we're definitely pushing towards, as Jim said in his history, getting back to where this program was really protecting places like Mount Si and places that we still love today.
Yeah, and everything you just said, Tom, is the reasons why the timber industry has generally not opposed this program in the way that they oppose other things. And it really has meant a pretty broad base of support. Not that 100% of people like it, but most people do.
Particularly if they understand what it is.
Well, if we don't have any questions, really appreciate your attendance today. It's great to have everybody on the call. It was awesome to see all the different groups represented. Please do reach out to Tom, myself, Jim. If you have any questions about the TLT program or want to get involved, we did put the sign up form for Lobby Day. You can use that. That would be helpful for us, but do reach out if you do want to participate. We really would love to see folks down there. Like Jim said, and Tom said too, it's a lot of fun. And I will say too that elected officials really love hearing from constituents in those visits. So it's energizing for us as advocates, it's energizing for elected officials. And so it's just a really great experience. And we'll keep you apprised too on progress, and look for more information from Washington Wild and the stewards. And have a great rest of your night. And hopefully, if you're in an area that's getting rained, you're safe, stay safe, and really appreciate it and look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you so much.
John, I can't find the hand raising icon, but I'd like to encourage everyone, if you know a piece of land that's managed that you think is high value, please think about putting in an application in years ahead. The bigger the backlog is, the more support we could show to the legislature that this is a really important program. So think about your favorite area.
Great point, Rick. And we're happy to help with applications too. And DNR, to be clear too, Kenny Ocker, who runs the program, is happy to answer questions as well. But we're happy to help, and we're happy to help even find or explore other ways to achieve your outcomes. So do use this as a resource, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing too. It's all of us together are making an impact. All right. Good night, everybody, and thank you so much again for attending.